Tuskegee University. I am presenting Fending for Yourself, a bioethics education program for the protection of human subjects for vulnerable populations. So my main job is I am the director of the largest PhD program at Tuskegee University, the Integrative Biosciences PhD program, and I'm grateful that some of our students are here in the audience. Thank you so much for coming. I also have a research lab. Some of those students are here. Thank you also for remembering me. And I think the most apropos is that I also have training in research ethics. And that's me with my nice certificate, so that you know I actually have some scholarship in the area. And so of all the things to talk about, I want to talk about ethics. My students have talked about some of the things that we did in our research. They were great in presenting that over the last 2 days. But ethics, and what is ethics? The rightness or wrongness of an action or an idea. And it's based upon our sense of morality, which we get from our parents, from our churches or places of worship, from our living experiences in our culture. And then ethics kind of varies. It's different for different individuals. And we sort of arrive at ethics from a community consensus. We decide what we believe as a community is right and wrong. And then we make rules about that rightness and wrongness. And that becomes the way we organize our society. Why present ethics at ARD? It's because, especially under the theme of family, youth, community, and economic development, it's because our research is publicly funded, right? Those grandmamas, cousins, Pookie and them, all those people out there in the communities, they're the ones who pay for our research, and they need research that they can trust. Our research is often about them, on them, their farms, their health, what did they eat, their habits. And it's supposed to ultimately help them, right? But I need to define fending for yourself. Fending for yourself is an idiom, it's a colloquial expression we use. It means you need to take care of and provide for yourself without depending on anyone else, because often you can't trust other people to watch out for your well-being, right? So here are the 1890 land-grant colleges and universities, right? And I showed that picture because I'm going to show something in a minute. When we talk about research misconduct, which is the opposite of ethics, people who are not honest with their research, it's a mix of two things, fraud and error. And how much fraud, which is the intent to deceive, versus how much carelessness, recklessness, determines whether or not you go to jail or get your research funding taken away from you. So it's the intent that separates research error from research misconduct. And research misconduct is it's categorized in 3 ways. We call it the FFP. Fabrication, which is when you make it up. Falsification, which is when you alter the result that you actually got. And then plagiarism, when you take credit for something that's not yours. Right? Fabrication, taking data out of thin air. Right? Curb stoning, which is a special type of fabrication where you cheat on surveys. Instead of you actually interviewing 100 women, you sit down on the curb and you make up their responses. Right? And then falsification, where you just change things in science. And of course, everybody knows plagiarism. Right? So, and there are other types, right? Inappropriate relationships with mentees and mentors, authorship violations, abuse of power, uninformed consent, which is what we're going to talk about, and benevolent deception. So how prevalent is research misconduct? The honest answer is we don't really know. Nature did a survey, and they found, this is asking us to self-report, that 1.5% of the 3,000 plus scientists that they asked actually admitted to falsifying, fabricating, or plagiarizing, right? Those are things you can have your research dollars stripped for. So when asked to self-report, 1.5%. But a third admitted to some type of cheating-ishness, is what I call it, right? I didn't break the law, don't take away my money, don't send me to jail, but yeah, didn't quite do everything right. Danielle Finelli from the University of Edinburgh got a well-cited study in 2009 where she compared 21 results of surveys for scientists all over the world and in various disciplines for 1987 to 2008. More than 11,000 respondents. All right, and so in that same token, if you ask them, did they commit a crime? Right, you see how low the number is? If you ask scientists if they knew someone who cheated, you see it gets a little higher. And then if you ask them, of whether or not they knew of some type of scientific misconduct or research misconduct that was not quite the kind that would get you stripped of your research funding, went up a little higher. So a conservative estimate is that there are more than 2,000 cases a year of one of those FFP crimes, with about 1,000 of those not even being reported to the appropriate authorities. And then if you look at the data that exists, it reveals that about 2% of scientists admit to cheating, right? 14% say they've seen somebody else cheat. And 33.7% of scientists admit to participating in something that wouldn't, again, get your research taken away, but it's questionable. And 72% have witnessed something questionable in some other scientists. So there's a lot of cheating and cheating issues out there, right? And so what happens after a scientist or researcher has been found guilty of cheating? This new paper that came out last year, or 2017, showed that out of 284 people who were actually found guilty by the government and written up and suspended, their research money was suspended. After their suspension, about half of them went back to work. Now, it depends on what level the scientist was. If it was a full faculty member, right, associate professor, full professor, most of them went back to work. Can you believe that? If they were a junior scientist or a postdoc or a graduate student, it ended their career. So that's a word to the students out there and young junior faculty. Don't let anybody else cheat. Don't cheat for someone else. Because faculty, they're able to revise their career. Students aren't often able to do that. So here are the 19 colleges that are represented here today, 18 states. And you see the red dots? Those are places where we've cheated. Not we haven't cheated. Those are places where other universities have cheated in our state. So we clean that up, right? 19 states, 18 states for the 19 colleges, and in all the colleges that have a red dot, there's been a government investigation and a finding of guilty of someone doing research inappropriately in those areas, right? We didn't do it. There were no 1890 schools listed in those. But there were schools in that area. And that research was about people in our population. So we can't be trusted. Here are cases from some of these universities showing that they lied, falsified, fabricated, right? Those are two of the big FFPs. Look at University of Washington, Chapel Hill, MD Anderson in Texas, Wayne State, UAB in Alabama. Right? They've gotten 2 or 3 violations. Right? Florida Atlantic University, University of Georgia, University of Kentucky. This list could go on and on. And see, the problem is the public only will trust science and will only support science if it can trust the scientists and the institutions. So we have a responsibility to watch out for not only what happens at our universities, but certainly what happens with the communities that surround us. So the purpose is to educate the community about possible human trials and to provoke you to consider the ethical and moral implications of proposed research and research-related activities before they occur. All right, so these are ethical principles: beneficence, doing what's best for the research subjects; autonomy, that the subject has a right to decide, not harming a subject, and then being truthful and having integrity. So here's the Alabama black belt, right? It's denoted by the dark prairie soils that are there. But the connotation now is that it's an area where there are a whole lot of black people. It's characterized by low socioeconomic indicators, illiteracy, huge health disparities, and also historically by the agricultural plantation farming. But what's most apropos for this talk is that that's where a lot of vulnerable population exist, right? They're a vulnerable population. And so because of the health disparities, the low socioeconomic indicators, all of that, they're target for research. And I'm sure in your states, you have similar areas where everybody goes to do the research. But who educates the people about the research being done to them? Thank you. The people in the Alabama Black Belt counties and in counties that are similar to those may not have the tools to assert their own personhood, their own rights, their own voices. So currently in Alabama, for instance, there are 8 NIH grants totaling $8 million to study the Alabama Black Belt. Since 1997, more than 188 grants totaling more than $107 million was given to universities to study. UAB got a lot of it, right? Remember I told you they have 3 research misconduct cases. pending. Tuskegee gets 23 of those funded proposals. So we're getting money to study these vulnerable populations, but who's educating the funding populations about what's happening? See, when we get the money, but we don't inform the people, then the people can't protect themselves. Now, a lot of the time, the studies that are being performed that feature misconduct are not ours. So like this study, right, this picture is from what people colloquially call the Tuskegee study. We don't call it that at Tuskegee because it wasn't ours. We didn't do this study. It was a U.S. Public Health Service study of untreated syphilis in Negro males in Tuskegee. But we bear the blame. Everybody calls it the Tuskegee study. No one calls it the U.S. Public Health study. Tuskegee didn't cause the study. But Tuskegee didn't protect the public either. Not one single student or faculty or staff member at Tuskegee was involved. But lots of people in our community were. So we have a responsibility, and they reported it lots of years, right? We're going to skip this slide, but there were more than 600 men involved, right? And we were sorry as a nation. We apologized in 1995. A few men were still alive to receive that apology. Here's another study. Again, we didn't do it, right? Tuskegee was asked to make cells to help study polio. We didn't know that these cells had come from this lady, Henrietta Lacks, right? Maybe we didn't ask enough questions, right? So the issue has to do with uninformed consent. This is Henrietta Lacks' family. And someone wrote a book about it, but that's not the only study. There are lots of studies that go on. So the heart of the matter is that Macon County, of which Tuskegee is the county seat, has been the subject of numerous human studies over the past 80 to 90 years. What is our responsibility to protect the public? Those studies did not affect our students, but it affected people around us. So we thought that a course might help. So, and there are additional studies, like here in 2004, GlaxoSmithKline sponsored at least 4 medical trials using Hispanic and Black women in New York's children's center, and none of their parents gave consent. So there are lots of these kinds of studies. There was a study about soldiers. Soldiers are vulnerable populations because they can't often say no. Here's a study GSK did about babies and falsified parental authorization. And then when we can't get approval here, we go overseas. So what we are proposing is ethics literacy for the people in these vulnerable populations so that they can protect themselves. And so an ethics education curriculum was developed by our students to prepare lay people, especially those from vulnerable groups, so that they could fend for themselves. And it allows them to distinguish a program from a research study, because often these words are used very loosely. It allows them to understand what an institutional review board is. It explains the fact that they have to be informed and consent to a study. It explains laws that are appropriate or related to what they're doing. And it explains the fact that they're vulnerable. Often people don't know that they're a vulnerable population. People are coming because of that. Thank you. So again, we remind ourselves of these ethical principles: beneficence, autonomy, non-malfeasance, and fidelity. And people can't assume that we're going to protect them. They have to protect ourselves. And we can't expect that the IRBs and government regulations are going to catch everything. Every member of the Alabama Black Belt community and communities like yours should have a basic research ethics literacy course. So we're going to skip that. Doesn't have to be prevalent. If it affects one person, it's wrong. So our students developed a presentation. They developed a syllabus. They developed an informed consent document, as well as pre and post-survey questions. So currently, the students are working on getting the IRB approval for this education program so that we can actually launch it into the Alabama Black Belt. And with that, I'll end.
Thank you. We have time. Don't have any time for questions. Let's give her a round of applause. We have any questions first? You can see her in the outside. Unfortunately, we are on a tight schedule. We have to move forward. I'm sorry, I can't take any questions. I'm so sorry. But let's move on to our next presenter. We have B. Rogers from the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore.